Good morning again. I just want to add my welcome to you to Amy's that has already been given. Whether you're here every week, whether this is your first time or you've been here a few times, you are just always welcome here. We're thankful that you're here. We are surrounded with very loud messaging. It seems it's everywhere and it's on every topic. Strident, sharp, many times sarcastic, even dehumanizing. In order to dominate the public discourse, politicians seek to outshout each other and carefully choose optics that they think will enhance their image and therefore further their agenda. Spiritual leaders do this too, as they or we align with a brand. Utilize a platform that will give a specific outcome. Optics, messaging, and direction are determined largely to further a specific agenda, sometimes with less regard for people or the goal and how it is reached. At this point, it's not a revolutionary statement that we are in a leadership crisis in this nation. We can feel it, we hear it, we see it. There is an authority vacuum. That's not to say there's a lack of power or displays of power, however. Those two things are different. Power walks on, treads on in order to get somewhere. It treads on anything that's in the way. People, animals, nature, healing work, art. Peaceful protests and protesters, even essential workers. Power was on full display recently on a half-mile walk to a spiritual worship sanctuary because it offered a specific optic and enormous public visibility. People were literally pushed aside, gassed out of the way for this display of power. Authority, on the other hand, knows its worth. But while we're talking about language nuance, let me just clarify that authority cannot be exchanged for authoritarianism. Those are two very different things. Authority doesn't need a photo op. It bends down to help a child. It picks up a bullied senior who has been thrown down to the ground. It serves a meal. It tends a garden. It sends a card in the mail. It washes out the eyes of those that have been tear gassed. It even stands alone in aggression. Power demands and dictates. Authority listens, invites, teaches. Power is characterized by excess. Authority is content to rest on rootedness. Where do we look? Who's our go-to for stability and grounding? What is our model when we are looking for a resilient and reliable foundation? We may look to a spiritual practice, a movement, our community of faith, sacred scriptures, a small group, wise leadership, all of whom can embody God. As we sort out who our go-to is this morning, consider Jesus' somewhat unusual words to his followers. All authority has been given to me. Now, why would Jesus have used these words after the resurrection and after having summoned his followers up to this mountain? He knew they were grieving. He knew they were confused and had lost their mooring. Why was authority even relevant to that particular conversation? Jesus knew them well. He knew what their homage meant too. You recall the text states, at the sight of the risen Christ, they fell down in homage. Jesus knew that they had lingering doubts. His assassination had left deep scars on his followers. This was a trauma they were going to carry on forever. Now that it was time for him to depart, he made the connection with where he had come from, with where he was going, and enveloped all of his followers into that connection. It was as if he needed to come full circle. He had come to this earth as a tiny baby, lived and breathed as we do, struggled with issues and the power brokers of his day, just as we do. He had lived and ministered with them, allowing them to touch him, experience him, know what would drive him. And now, after the resurrection, he rounded another corner. Listen to what the writer of the letter to the Philippians says about this journey Jesus was on. Philippians 2, though he, Jesus, was in the form of God, he did not consider being equal to God something to exploit, but he emptied himself by taking the form of a slave and becoming like human beings. When he found himself in the form of a human, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God highly honored him. Jesus had voluntarily traveled this road. He took on the form of a human, experienced the sweat, the fatigue, the hunger, the tears, the laughter, and the pleasure, as well as the anguish of humanity, right beside his human followers. He carried the hatred of those in power in the very marrow of his bones. He was willing to bear the execution by those frenzied by a taste of power. Power did not and does not define Jesus, but authority does. His authority was rooted in what he had experienced. Authority has to be earned, but it is given by someone else. In Jesus's case, by Abba God, the source of all life. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth, Jesus said in Matthew 28. I've brought two photos for you to consider this morning. I feel they show the difference between power and authority very well. The first one is Aisha Evans at a Baton Rouge, Louisiana protest after the murder of another Black man, Alton Sterling, by two police officers in 2016. The second is a peaceful, unnamed water protector versus militarized police, where this water protector stood upon sacred grounds, defending water sources from Dakota Access Pipeline expansion in North Dakota, also in 2016. What are your observations? Who wields the power? Who displays authority? Authority is earned and given. Power can be grabbed. Authority has a background, a history of consistent action. Power can be demanded and abused without warning. Authority germinates in a bed of suffering. Power avoids suffering and appearance of any weakness. When Jesus said that all authority was given to him by Abba God, his words obliquely addressed the power-hungry mob, the religious authority working in tandem with the political structures to carry out his sentencing and execution, but ultimately, which could not keep him down. They had power, he had earned, and was therefore given authority. His words on this mountain to his followers were not hollow. He was not making some flimsy, but you just have to trust me statement. His words, "All authority has been given to me," embraced the gamut of his whole life, his birth, his life, his ministry, his death, and his resurrection. He did not use his rights to exploit those among whom he came to live. Rather, he had taken the lowest position, served others, and in doing so had earned a place of authority and respect. What follows in this text is a statement upon which the Christian church, for better or for worse, has hinged its mission. Go, make disciples, baptize, and teach. Throughout the millennia, the church has spent a great deal of time preaching about, emphasizing, publishing written material, and later on video and online materials, devising systems to carry out this assignment. Since the gospel of Christ has been fractured, blurred, and severely misappropriated, and that's not a new phenomenon, that's happened throughout church history, we would do well to look at what precedes what has been termed the Great Commission. As we look to continually clarify how we do mission, we first need to take a step back. We as Christ followers have the obligation to take a close look at, first of all, whether we choose to align with power or with authority. And secondly, hopefully, having chosen authority, to determine what the authority we align ourselves with looks like. And only then can we begin to plan and devise a strategy to move forward. Looking at church history over generations, not doing so has resulted in abuses, immense abuses of making disciples, baptizing, and teaching. But abuses don't need to discourage us. At any point, we can have a long, hard look at ourselves. We can ask forgiveness. We can look at correcting our understanding and our praxis so that we can carry out Jesus' mission more authentically. I'm not going to interpret the words that follow. This morning, I draw attention to the basis upon which these words rest. Words have no meaning unless they are attached to a solid base. Earlier this week, I watched the memorial service for George Floyd, the man who died under the knee of a police officer while begging for his breath. The family's history, we were told, was permeated with suffering and oppression and poverty. But this is not what took center stage. It did set the stage, however, letting us know that this family, and George Floyd in particular, had earned authority. He was the go-to for immediate and extended family members and many people in his community. Day after day, probably without even consciously thinking about it, he embraced his mission, his calling of caring, nurturing, providing for, being a mentor to those who are around him and those who came after him. The memorial service with its music, there were stories, there was a eulogy, a sermon, and a bold cry of justice. All of that bore witness to a mission and a solid base, a foundation resting on the one to whom all authority has been given by Abba God. The police officer who held his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds as life and breath drained from this person may have seen George as worthless, not worthy of regard as a human being. The officers grabbed power in order to take a life. But power ultimately could also not keep George Floyd down. George never relinquished the authority he had earned through a life of sacrifice, service, love, and compassion. The memorial service paid tribute to George Floyd's earned authority given to him by the one who then accompanied him into the world where his mother waited for him. Power and authority. We need to discern this difference daily in our own lives, in those we observe, and in those we choose to align ourselves with. Who is our go-to? Which voices do we listen to? Which platforms do we adopt? Which posture do we take at any given moment in history, but especially in this moment? This is not a political question. This is a question of allegiance, a basis for authenticity, providing a witness amongst ourselves and in our community that is reflective of Jesus, to whom all authority has been given. When God is co-opted to serve our goals, used as a kind of power tool, we have exploited Jesus for our own projects. On the world and national scene, it looks as if power is winning. Some believe winning is everything, but ultimately, authority endures while power crumbles. I chose these two pictures very intentionally, Aisha Evans and the unnamed water protector. They're pictures of recent events, but soon they vanished under new injustices. Thankfully, there are times when individual situations resurface, as was the case with the Dakota Access Pipeline just a few months ago. But many times they simply live within this larger and growing body of stories of power and suffocation, along with sacrifice, suffering, and earned authority. This struggle we are in today has been with us for a long, long time. Each time the struggle erupts, we are presented with the opportunity to unite as a community of Christ followers, reach for an authority based on daily life experience with Jesus, and present an alternative to raw power. Authority knows its value. It doesn't need a photo op, but it looks for connection, for communion with a fellow human, with a neighbor, with a community. Power dominates and divides. Authority rests in the strength of unity. Power exploits. Authority nurtures and breathes life. The one to whom all authority has been given, Jesus the Christ. This one invites us to a large table, an open table, a banquet table, a healing table.